Good day and welcome to the Business of Adulting, a bi-weekly podcast that is tailored to help you build your businesses and also ensure that you realize revenues and have a sustainable businesses. So this podcast is actually tailored to answer a lot of questions, but I'll just go through a few of the questions that we're answering in this podcast. One of the key questions that we're asking ourselves is how do I adult as a budding entrepreneur? Is entrepreneurship is even for me? What does innovation have to do with it? Does mental health matter? Where does the mindfulness and resilience put me in the entrepreneurial journey? These are some of the questions we tackle robustly in the Business of Adulting, a monthly podcast that is available in all your platforms. As you already know us, we've been pushing and trying to ensure that we grow and create this platform for you to actually consume as much content as possible, because our goal is to ensure that you get real information and tools that will assist you in your journey, entrepreneurial journey, to ensure that you find the right content which will help you to build a sustainable business and realize, and most importantly, your profits and be able to keep your business running. So we're not only talking about the business, because also very important for us that we look into the mental health, because those are the key challenges that our entrepreneurs do face with, especially when things are not going well. So it's always important that we do a mental check to see what kind of mental state you have to be in for you to build sustainable businesses. What kind of the key components? What does resilience mean for entrepreneurs? What does innovativeness mean for entrepreneurs? So innovation doesn't only apply to businesses or building products. It also applies into how we tackle the challenges, real world life challenges that we get to face with. But before we can get into it, I'm with Svevuta. So today is just the two of us in this podcast. And also, please do this one favor for us. Click on that like, please subscribe, share this podcast with your peers, share this with your family and friends. They might get one or two things that might change their lives, something that might change their businesses. In the last episode, we're talking about entrepreneurship, where we delved into a lot trying to understand we talked about marketing, what does marketing mean when you're growing a business? Why marketing is so important for you to build sustainable businesses? Can you even generate revenues without marketing? What are the key strategies that you need to look at when you want to develop marketing? And how do you even measure your marketing at the success of your marketing strategies that you've put in place? So through our discussion, we've realized that it's actually a very broad topic. So we decided that we'll have a three-part series in this particular topic, which is marketing, just to ensure that we cover as much information as possible and also give you practical tools that will assist you when you're actually developing your marketing strategies and to venture into entrepreneurship as you're running your businesses. Maybe you've been doing your businesses, you've been running some of the marketing campaigns, but then they haven't been very successful. And we hope that if you spend time with this episode, especially this series, it will help you to uncover some of the hidden things that you might have overlooked when you're developing your past marketing strategies. And mostly for you who's new into entrepreneurship, who's aspiring to start a business, I think it's very important for you to understand the key things that you need to look at when you get at that stage of actually developing your marketing strategies, what you need to look at. But the key topic that we're tackling today is building a brand. We're just trying to understand, what does it mean to build a brand as a business owner? What does it mean when you say a business has a brand identity? So those are the key questions that we'll be answering today. We have Svevuta today who will be actually leading us in this topic, because it's the topic that rests very well with him. He's got every expertise that you might need in terms of building brands, especially brands that people connect with and love. So just a primer on this topic. What does it mean to build a brand? So most of the time we hear people talk about brands, and the first thing that comes into mind is the name and the logo. I'll just leave it there. And I think Svevuta, you can introduce yourself, greet our audience, and then we can just give us a brief overview what is brand identity? What does it mean when we say a company has a brand? What are the key things that one would want to look at when they're actually creating a brand that resonates with their target audience? Over to you, sir.
So thanks for that, Sipo. Before I get going, you mentioned a little earlier that people should like and subscribe on our various social media platforms. Just like to thank everyone who has done that. We received quite a lot of quite a number of views rather on the full length podcast on YouTube for our previous episode, and quite a lot of engagement, especially on TikTok. So a huge word of thanks to everyone who has been engaging with the podcast. Yeah. And you said something there that I'm not quite sure I agree with entirely, that I'm an expert when it comes to today's topic. I'm just someone who has a keen interest, far from being an expert, but every day I am learning and hope to one day to truly achieve expert status. But yeah, interesting topic. And in the previous episode, I mentioned that I would invite a guest, someone who is in my network, who I actually do consider as an expert. Unfortunately, because of many commitments, we couldn't get him to sit with us for this particular recording. But he did agree to joining us just as soon as his schedule allows it. So it might not be a part of this series, but he will be jumping on board with us, and he will be sharing some great actual expert insights into the topic of marketing. So last week we spoke, or not last week, but in our previous episode rather, we spoke about how to market your business in the correct, or to the correct market segment rather. So how to make the right noise in the right spaces. And today's topic it follows on the previous topic we tackled, and we're looking at how to build a brand that people love and connect with. So you've made noise in the right space, so you believe, but how do you get people to actually hear you? And once they've heard you, how do you get them to sort of go with you? How do you get them to vibe with you, as the young people would say today? And if we can, dive right into things, and maybe we could kick things off with sharing our opinions on this one. And I am of the opinion that we should forget about building a brand that everyone will love and everyone will connect with. I've had a great phrase that people will throw around from time to time, that you are not money, not everyone will love you. And I
Mm,
think it helps if you are that realistic, even when looking at things through a business lens, that you won't please everyone, and maybe you should stop doing so. Rather focus your energy and resources on on a targeted area where you are likely to get a return on your investments. So I'd like to kick things off with just making that clear that, in my opinion, not everyone will love you, nor will they connect with you. So you need to identify the people that matter to you, and then get those people to love and connect with you. I listened to a lot of podcasts. I was listening to one the other day, and it was someone who has a podcasting channel himself, and he said he was being interviewed on another podcast, and the interviewer asked, how is it that you've achieved, the level of success that you have? And the other gentleman responded, I focused on the audience that matters. You know,
mm,
I fashioned my podcast to appeal only to those people who matter. So there is we've talked about market segmentation a lot in the previous episodes, and it's worth bringing it up again. There are different, or the general market can be segmented into different pools, and there is a pool that is referred to as the mass market, that generally appeals to the broad market base. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, and some of them will actually tell you that, and I think this is funny, that mass market refers to black people, in the context of South Africa, because they are the majority, and that's a slight, to put it diplomatically, misinterpretation of the concept.
And just on that, so you as an entrepreneur and you're saying you have a product that appeals to the mass market, you also need to go a bit deeper to understand, because there's a thin line between customers and the mass market, or the consumers, mass consumers. Sometimes you find that your solution will appeal to everyone, or will be consumed by everyone. But then how many people will be paying for that? It means those people, the general people that will be consuming your solution, are actually your end consumers. They are the ones who get to consume it. But they are beneficiaries. But sometimes you find that the beneficiaries are not exactly the ones who are paying for that. Then there is a customer that should be responsible for paying for that. For example, if you developing a vaccine, the general public will have to be vaccinated, but who will be buying that vaccine? Mostly would be the government. So your customer is no longer the general masses. Those people are your beneficiaries from the solution that will be bought by the government. I thought I should just make that very clear
Yeah.
to our yes.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, we must make a distinction between a customer and a consumer. Sometimes, like the customer isn't the consumer, as with the example Sipo made, and another example, and it's something I am very immersed in now because I have a 1-year-old child, is baby products, or products for kids in general. The consumer is the kid, but the customer is the parent. So
Yes, exactly.
in your marketing, you must aim to please both. I mean, for toddlers like my son, you are mainly targeting the parent because the toddler can't interpret anything. But maybe for a teenager, who understands certain things, then you certainly want to appeal to both. You want the teenager to want your product, but you want your parent to know that it's safe for the teenager, that it will help them, one way or the other, and so that they will agree to purchasing it for their teenagers. But that's another conversation we can.
And then I think
Um,
I like what you just raised when you're talking about that, because even with the toddler, even though they wouldn't say anything about the product that they has been bought or that they are actually consuming, there is a promise of value that you have. There's a value that you have promised the parents, that if you give my toddler this formula, your toddler this formula, they will grow. They won't have some of the health issues that could be related to other products. So even there, the value has to be very clear so that the person who buys can see the value that they've been promised with. So the value for money, they can see, okay, this product is doing exactly what was it promised for, which actually I think this naturally takes us to what it means to brand, to actually to develop a brand, for which we will just touch on now. I just thought it's important that we
yeah,
understand that into the value or the promise to the
sure.
customer.
No, certainly. So, uh, going back to the point I was making about market segmentation. So you have a mass market but we want to in this episode unpack how you build a brand that people will love and connect with. So, depending on what it is that you offer, right? And it's not a lot of businesses that will appeal to appeal to the mass market. You probably will appeal to a specific segment of the market. So how then do you get people within that segment to love you and connect with you? And here is where brand identity comes in. Who are you? Why would I, as a potential consumer, want to associate with you? And I have a bit of a contrarian take on this one. And we can tie this back to evolutionary psychology. So I think I mean, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have picked up on this at this point that, you know, I am very expressive personally, and I generally tie a lot of my opinions to my personality. But interestingly enough, I found that it isn't only me who is like that. It's actually just about all of us, although we express it differently. So to uh, clarify the point relating to evolutionary psychology, it's why evolutionary psychology informs why we make the decisions we make. And in fact, in a lot of the consumer research studies, it has great utility. So you need to understand that even within a certain market segment, you have different personas or archetypes of prospective consumers, and you need to understand, you know, how they think, what is likely to influence their decision making, you know, within the spectrum of what you offer, and why they should buy your product instead of the product of your competitor. And so you need to be willing to make some sacrifices, you know, when it comes to that decision. You need to be able to identify members of your tribe, right? And you need to speak to members of your tribe. Now, that will quite effectively alienate anyone whom you haven't identified as a member of your tribe, because your marketing will be directed to people who understand a specific language. Um, so we can observe this trend across various industries, and if you listen to the language that is used by some brands, and I think this is quite prominent in fashion. The language that is used, it appeals to a certain person, and it might actually uh, deter another person from even looking in the direction of the particular brand because of the language that is used. And so by doing so, you have sort of put some people off um, even considering your brand, but you've related so well with other people that you've managed to secure them at least as part of the tribe, and hopefully at a later stage a potential consumer of your product. So I think once we start to realize that not everyone is going to love us and we aren't going to be able to connect with everyone, then the next question is, who do I want to connect with? Now, uh, maybe the logical answer is, well, I want to connect and love or receive love from the majority of the consumer base. Now that's also a risk. You know, you might take that approach to say what's going to appeal to at least the majority, then if not everyone. But how are you able to connect, you know, with the masses? And so at this point, I will tie it back to linking whom you connect with or want to connect with who you are, you know, because then your potential consumers gravitating to your product is organic. You know, there's a great line by one of my favorite rappers which says, "Real recognizes real, and you're looking familiar." And you know, without saying anything, there is an energy that, you know, if two people are vibrating more or less at the same frequency,
Yeah.
that will cause them to come closer to one another. You know, without necessarily having said anything. It could be in the way that they dressed. It could be in their general attitude and outlook on life. You know, that will draw them closer to one another. So, in my opinion, you want to target, and target almost seems cynical if we are looking at things from this approach, but you certainly want to position yourself so that people who vibrate at a similar frequency gravitate towards you organically, and thereby you will build loyalty within, you know, the cohort of people who did gravitate towards you. And maybe, who knows, with time, that particular subculture of yours could be mainstream and could appeal to the general masses. But it's important that you build a core of customers by connecting with them in a manner that is organic, that will have them gravitate towards you naturally, based on an energy that you give off. So what is it that you stand for? And in closing, before I hand over back to you, Sipho, there are some great global brands and some great local brands who have mastered this, you know. So it's a trade-off. It's a trade-off. First, I didn't acknowledge that you're not gonna please everyone, and then identify what you are willing to trade off for what, and is it in the long term going to pan out well for you? And I think if you manage to establish loyalty through connecting in an organic manner, then you are likely to receive ROI. But in closing, it's not like marketing is only the beginning. It's only the start of things, right? You can attract people, you know, you can get them in your corner, but then it's about delivering value that they want to that they want to consume and that they are willing to part with money for. And it's doing that consistently. We've seen a lot of one-hit wonders, you know, brands that mushroom and are only relevant for a short while and after that disappear. So if you want to be in it for an extended period of time, have that solid loyalty, but then ensure that you are consistent with servicing them with value of the highest quality.
And which brings us into the most important thing that we have to look into when you're actually building a brand, which what you stand for. I think Sue is actually tied into that, clearly trying to make sure that you understand that you stand by yourself and you have a clear vision. Because people, by nature, they are always looking for a sense of belonging. So what you stand for must appeal to your customers. So you must have clear values, which is very important for you. So if you do not have clear values, you don't have clear vision, it's difficult for you to build a brand that will be unique, a brand that will be memorable, and a brand that will be authoritative. Because what you do when you bring a brand, you actually bring something that will demonstrate authority in the space. That this is my space also. This is what I stand for. So two things. You are talking about the product that you are developing. So what do you stand for with your product? I stand for luxury. If you're saying you are standing for luxury, do you actually provide that luxury? Can your customers, those who get to do business with you, realize the luxury that you've promised them? And if you do, then rest assured those people or those customers will stay with you. So you must make sure that whatever you promise your customers is key and it's something of value. So your values must be very clear. You want to demonstrate people that there is still luxury and they can still get luxury when and whenever they need it, which is very important. Wherever they need it, you can bring luxury to their doors, which is very important. Say, for example, you're talking about you stand for reliability and performance. I'm just making an example how Apple built their brand and they are so reputable with reliability and performance of their devices that they are selling. There's no doubt about that. If you buy an Apple, you will get a reliable phone, and that phone will perform to its utmost best. You won't have challenges with the space, won't have challenges with anything. So it's very important that you spend a lot of time crafting and finding a position. Because for you to actually appeal to customers, you have to understand that we have found a position in a certain market, how this market works, and what is missing. You see, you might not necessarily produce. Yes, that you can come to.
Sure. On that point, you know, I've encountered entrepreneurs who claim their value to be quality. And then you look at their business model canvas and you look at their key partners, who supply them in some instances would say raw materials. And you ask, why did you go with that particular supplier? And they will tell you, well, that they are the cheapest. Those two things, uh, for the most part, I know it may not always be the case, but cheapest doesn't generally translate to quality. True quality is usually more costly, because it's more expensive to produce. And again, this isn't true with certainly everything. So when you are developing your business models, those are certainly things you must be mindful of. Are your inputs, so you've identified a value, maybe it's performance and reliability. That's your value. That's what you are promising to your potential customers. But then your inputs must be consistent with that. You can't promise reliability and reliability and performance when your inputs uh, are not in keeping with that. When you are buying, inputs, or when you are using inputs that could potentially break at any turn because they were cheaply manufactured, and other components that are not reliable. So your value uh, must be linked to your inputs. Yeah, you can't promise something that you are not willing to put in yourself.
Yeah, and that brings us to just open up this box of a brand before we can talk about the brand identity. So a brand has a set of features. See, so it can start with a name. That's a brand, because when we see this name, a name alone doesn't bring identity. It's just one of the key features that you need when you're building a brand. It has to have a tagline, it has to have a logo, a symbol, then it has a voice, which is very important. So the voice is what customers usually align with and what they expect when they hear your name, you see, which is very important. So whatever you stand for, it must be very clear to your customers to an extent that they have a clear understanding when they hear about Lusho picnics. What should comes into their mind is luxury. There I'm getting a luxury experience. I'm creating lasting memories with my families, with my loved ones. I'm actually taken out of the ordinary things that we usually do when we're celebrating birthdays, when we're celebrating our anniversaries. We no longer just go to the restaurants and waiting for everyone, but we're creating a very different experience that is an element of luxury. In fact, that is built upon luxury in it. You see, so it's very important also now think about the service that you do have in place today. What do you stand for? Do you stand for efficiency? Do you stand for quality? Just as we're just touching to that, do you stand for quality? Do you stand so you need to think and sit down before you can talk about names, talk about taglines, logos, and symbols, and designs of what colors that you're going to put in place and all that to actually come up with an identity, with a brand identity. You see, so the brand identity, its focus is mostly on the brand personalities. So it's the values that you convey to your customers. So it's important that you have a clear understanding as a person when you're building a brand, that this brand, I want to resonate with this kind of people because this kind of people actually stand for this. And before you know it, if you have crafted your identity clearly enough and effectively, you're unconsciously starting a community that will stand for you. For example, there's a community of April. See, it's very interesting that people who are using April, they're actually advocating for it. You see, you come across with someone who's using an Android, you know what's going to happen within those two parties, and each person is going to stand for what they stand for, because they have been given, and the values and what they stand for has been clearly demonstrated into these products that they are currently now absorbing and adopting and using. So it's one of the key things that you want to actually spend time when you're talking about when you're talking about when you're building a brand that will resonate. Maybe Svid, you can also touch on into some of the contrarian schemes or contrarian attributes that can put when you're talking about building a brand.
Yeah. Look, I'm not sure if this is contrarian, but I don't think it's as out there as it should be in the mainstream and in mainstream literature. Um, yeah, and maybe it is, but you just need to find it. You know, people will talk about do what you love because then you don't have to work for a single day. And if you start to think about what that means, you know, if you're doing what you love, then you know, then you're not working. I mean, let's imagine that you enjoy playing football, and then you decide to pursue that as a career. So you're doing what you love because you're playing football, but you are working. I mean, because you need to play on certain days, and you know the schedule you follow, where you might have preferred to go on holiday. But if we dig a level deeper into that statement, and as it relates to business, and maybe if we replace the word love with what comes naturally, so do what comes naturally, then you never work a day. Um, you know, you are doing something that comes to you naturally. It's intrinsic to your personality. You know, you don't need to think about it, and I say that loosely, but you don't need to be, you know, you almost fall into a rhythm naturally. It's almost automatic for you, and I think that's the same thing or same thinking we should apply to brand identity as well. Like it starts with you. What am I most comfortable doing? And I am in no way suggesting that you should stick in your comfort zone here. By all means, do challenge yourself, do put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you can experience growth. But in terms of your brand identity, if it is true to you and who you are, then it becomes effortless. You know, then you are never faced with a situation where you need to pivot on your brand identity all of a sudden, because it is who you are. I mean, if your personality changes, believe it or not, that does sometimes happen, and in fact, it should happen. If you are the same person you are today as you were 10 years ago, maybe you need to look at the mirror and ask yourself a few questions. But the point I'm making is this: your brand identity should be something that is so intertwined with you, and what you stand for, that it becomes seamless to drive. You know,
Yes.
I was speaking to Usipo about a workshop I was a part of a few weeks ago, and one of the speakers spoke to us about ethics, and he gave us some questions that are noted. And he said these are questions, you know, that we should ask ourselves before getting into business deals, or before pursuing some opportunities or making some decisions. But I think these questions are pertinent for realizing one's core, one's identity, which can then be translated into the business identity or the brand identity. Because I think, especially as you know, booming entrepreneurs, our personal lives are very much intertwined with our businesses. You know, especially right at the beginning. As an entrepreneur, while you are growing your business, you are your business, and how you represent your business is how people will perceive your business, and therefore your personal branding is your business branding. And ethics do form a critical part of what I was alluding to earlier by tying it to who you are. So the first question the gentleman shared with us is, what would I be happy for this decision to be headlining the news tomorrow? And this is called the sunlight test, and you can look it up on Google. If a particular decision you make were to be made public news tomorrow, if it were to be, trending on social media, would you be happy for that to be known?
Yes.
Yeah, is this something that you'd be proud of and something that you'd stand by, or are you making a shady dealing, hoping that it never is brought to surface and that no one ever finds out about it? And your daily activities, by the way, will eventually catch up with you. So you might have a value and you are proud of it and it's printed out and put up on a wall somewhere, that you are transparent and you are honest, and then maybe you get involved in a shady dealing to make a quick buck, to pay for something really urgent, and then you do it again next month, and then next thing you know, in a year you've done it 10, 15, 20 times. So whereas you have a value of transparency in the wall, but everyone you've had the shady dealing with knows that not to be true. They know what your true value is, and it's not
Yes.
what you have
Yes.
up on the wall. So we must live out our brand, and it being written in black and white will only get us so far. It's the lived experience that people will really connect with. You might have it as in bold writing that you are for honesty and transparency, but I know that if I need to get something done quickly, I just pay you a couple of $100, and you'll be willing to paint outside the line, so as to, helping me get along quicker. So that's the first question. The second question that the gentleman threw our way was, is there an ethical non-negotiable at play in whatever I'm about to get involved with? Does it, or will it require for me to go against some of the ethics that I uphold? And these are not yes or no questions, and an argument could be made that there's a lot of gray, and
Yes.
what is even ethics? But these are questions that you answer yourself. It's not about me convincing you otherwise. It's about what you are happy with, and what you can, what you will be proud of if it were to be made public the following day. And if the answer is no, then maybe go in the opposite direction. And just very quickly to read through the last four questions. Will my action make the world a better place? Again, open-ended. But deep down, I think you should have a simple answer that resonates with you as an
And, and
individual.
and and I like the last part that we are bringing, because it it's very much part of what would help you build an identity. Because what happens is that when you're building an identity, when you give your brand an identity, it helps you to have something to stand for as a company. We all know that most of the companies, in fact, every company has a vision, has a mission. But can you have a mission and the vision? Can you have a mission, most importantly, before you having an identity? Because I believe that a mission is something that gives you purpose. See, so it for me, I think there's one would think it would take it the other way. One would think it's important that you have a mission before you have a vision, before you have an identity. But I think for you to have a proper purpose, you have to first have an identity, what you stand for, and then what is your mission. If you want to make your actions to have an impact into the community, you already have an identity that we have put in place. Now, this identity enables you to come up with a purpose. Okay, with what I want to be associated with. I want to be identified as someone who's offering a luxury, who help people to achieve luxury, to consume or to experience luxury experience. That's my identity. It's what I want to be identified for. Whatever that follows. So my purpose will revolve around that. What I stand for will revolve around my identity. But then what does this identity, maybe viewer, you can help our listeners in here. What does this identity have to do with generating new customers and ensuring that you also keep on delighting the existing ones? And just before Svue answers these questions, please, wherever you are, subscribe, share this, like this episode, and also make sure that you share it with as many people as possible. So just give our entrepreneurs, as I'm about to wrap this episode, what does brand identity have to do with acquiring new customers and retaining the existing ones?
Sure. Okay. Before I tackle the question, I just want to read through the other questions just very quickly. I'm not gonna,
Yes.
yeah, read more than just the actual question. So, what would happen if everyone did this? Is another one. The next one is, what will this do to my character or the character of my business? And then the character of the business is the identity of the business. And lastly, is this consistent with my values and principles? And another one, just a bonus one, if you will. What would my mother think of this? And that, based on what you think, it would more or less take us in the right direction, provided that you listen to what she thinks. But of course, all of this in the context of business and entrepreneurship must have an impact on the bottom line. So, how do you translate your brand identity to new to gaining new customers and retaining the customers that you already have? Well, I quite actually don't know if I have an answer to that one. But if you go back to what I said a little earlier about connecting with a particular tribe, which in almost every instance will be an emotional connection. Um, Once a potential customer, so this may be someone. We spoke a little earlier about, customers and consumers, and we made reference to toddlers and then teenagers and so on and so forth. So if we imagine the stages of life, and you could apply this to people who are already adults, and maybe who, get into, maybe get a raise, get a promotion, get a new job, and whom are able to earn better and hence get an introduction to different and new products and so on and so forth. So the point I'm trying to get across is, with the different developmental stages of a human being, at each of those stages you'll be introduced to new things, and you will be maturing with or your emotions will be maturing, and hence the emotional connections you are able to make. And with the second example of someone who is generating more income than they were in recent years or recent months, and thereby being introduced to new products and new items and so on and so forth, they will also be looking to connect with new brands emotionally when it's time for them to make purchasing decisions. And so by having a solid brand identity, it will help you, it'll place you at an advantage, so that at each of those stages where a human is developing and hence maturing and seeking to make new emotional connections, or making more, generating more income, and hence looking to explore with different products and services. If you are able to, at each of those instances, and a number of other examples I'm sure you can think of, if you are able to ensure that you are well positioned, so that you are able to connect with people of your tribe, people that you have identified as, an area where you'd like to make noise and receive some relevance, that they are able to connect with you. And so you'll generate new customers when these people reach those different stages where they're looking to establish new emotional connections with products. And of course, by maintaining your identity, then you will retain those people you've already whom you've already inducted into your community. It's happening a lot today, with the social conversation moving quite drastically. I saw a post the other day where they've apparently casted a new James Bond. I'm not sure how true this is. I was actually I just didn't have time. I wanted to verify it yesterday, but they've apparently casted a black lady as the new James Bond. Now again, I'm not sure how true that is, but you have people like before the social discourse changed, as it is quite drastically at the moment. The James Bond 007 brand had a very clear identity, in who James Bond is. But all of a sudden, maybe it's not all of a sudden, but certainly if it is true that the casting is changing, then the brand identity of the franchise is quite effectively changing as well. And you have a lot of people who were loyal to the brand that will no longer continue their loyalty because what the fundamental connection they had is changing, and so they are therefore no longer able to connect in the same way, and different people have different opinions about that. It's the same with and I know I'm making another movie reference here with superhero movies. A lot of people have the sentiment that they are pushing a political agenda rather than being entertaining, which is the fundamental emotional connection they had initially. Again, this is open for discussion. Different people have different opinions, but it can happen that even with people whom you already had um, as part of your community, that if you change your identity, then you lose them because the fundamental emotional connection that they had, which had them be a part of the tribe initially, is changed. And they will look for the next best thing, if you are no longer able to satisfy them in that way. But whereas these franchises I've just referred to are losing some people, they are gaining some people because new people or people who didn't have that connection before will be able to establish it now, because now there is something all of a sudden that is appealing with them in this brand, whereas it wasn't there before. So personal identity does certainly have an impact on the bottom line. And again, in closing, it's about those trade-offs. With these examples I've just made, these movie franchises were able or were evidently able to decide on trade-offs to say, okay, to encapsulate this segment of the market that we did not have a lot of traction with previously, we are willing to trade this off. We are willing to let go of these people who were members of our tribe before, so that we can get these new people to join our tribe after having this pivot of our brand identity. So to yeah, please come in, Sipho.
And it's not wrong to change the identity, because oftentimes your identity is influenced by what you stand for. If what we have been standing for has changed, because sometimes I will just put it in a form of a market. Markets are very dynamic and they change every day. See, sometimes you might have developed your brand and your purpose was to solve a certain challenge in a certain market domain. But now the market dynamics, the regulations in that market actually dictates the other way. It's like an energy company that has been mostly focused on coal. Now they are forced now to rethink their strategies now in response to the environmental regulations and in ensuring that they are still contributing sustainable to the economy without hurting the environment. So those companies are actually forced to find new ways. It means the identity will change a bit. Are they going to lose some of the people? Yes. Are they going to find other people, more customers? Yes, definitely they will find a lot of customers given what is happening. I just wanted to record that, but it's very important that we also not very averse into change. We must embrace change, especially if we are in business. Businesses is influenced by people's needs, is influenced by your customers and all those things. So it means customers have a key role to play in how you actually build your brand position.
Yeah, 100%. Because ultimately you are servicing those customers. But yeah, I think just as a parting point from me on this one, it's what we brought up earlier around acknowledging that you will not be loved, nor will you be able to connect with everyone. So identify the people that matter, and then invest your efforts in trying to have those people love you and establishing a connection with those people. Yeah.
Yes, and then I just want to leave one quote by James Zabik. He's a brand strategist at HubSpot. It would be interesting to check their blog. These guys are doing amazing jobs in terms of marketing, developing marketing strategies, as well as assisting people to build brands. So it's also important. One of his quotes, he says, one of the most important things to consider when building a brand identity is how your messaging will resonate with your target audience. He further says, start by finding out your audience's pain points, and communicating how your company or product helps solve them. He further adds that you might have a flashy logo or an eye-catching marketing copy, but if it doesn't address your customers' pain points clearly and effectively, it will be challenging to build a strong and lasting brand identity. So it's important as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, to clearly understand what you stand for, but most importantly, how are you ensuring that you solve your customers' challenges? How do you ensure that they get value out of the product or service that you're providing for them? And thank you so much for spending time with us. We hope to be with you very soon. We have a lot of interesting topics that we want to tackle, and please do subscribe and do share this and share this with your audience, with your loved ones, share it with your friends and colleagues. They might learn one or two things. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Cheers, everybody. Catch you on the next episode.